Thank you very much, and thank you very much for both the introduction but also the opportunity to come here to present AlzeCure Pharma to you here today. Now, we're a biotech company developing novel therapies for Alzheimer's disease and other severe disorders. Now, AlzeCure Pharma was founded in 2016, but was spun out of the AlzeCure Foundation, which stems back to 2012. We are based at the Karolinska Institutet in the Stockholm area, and the company consists of a team with highly experienced industry drug discovery professionals. We also have a strong network of key opinion leaders that we work very closely with, including Professor Bengt Winblad at the Karolinska Institutet. We have two key project platforms in the company. One, it's called NeuroRestore, is targeting novel symptomatic treatments for cognitive disorders. And the other one is called Alzstatin, which is a novel disease-modifying treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And we have 5 candidates in our project pipeline, as I will show you later on. AlzeCure Pharma is listed on Nasdaq's First North Premier since November last year, and we have a market cap of 350 million. Obviously, being a small company, it's very important for us to have a strong and competent team, and I'm really happy to say that we do have a very experienced team, both in the founders and management team with many years of experience in drug discovery industry, specifically in this area, but also in the board of directors, where we have competencies both on the clinical operations side, marketing, but also on private equity. Now, Alzheimer's disease is, as you may know, the most common form of dementia and counts about 60 to 70% of all forms of dementia. And today's about 50 million people are affected worldwide, which results in enormous socioeconomical costs, counting to close to $1 trillion this year alone. Unfortunately, for this deadly disorder, there are very limited therapeutic options available, and there is a very strong medical need, both for better symptomatics in the field, but certainly so also for disease-modifying compounds that can prevent or even potentially cure the disease. Given the huge unmet medical need in this area, it's no surprise that a disease-modifying treatment is estimated to achieve at least $10 billion US in annual sales. Now, if we have a look at the Alzheimer's disease brain, you will find a number of key pathological features, 2 of which are the formation and aggregation of a protein called amyloid beta in the brain, forming these characteristic aggregates and eventually plaques in the brain that are easily visible. Another feature is the dysfunction and loss of nerve cells and synapses in the brain, which actually cause the symptoms of the disease. Now, these cardinal features is specifically what we're targeting with our 2 different project platforms, NeuroRestore and Alzstatin. Both of them being small molecule programs. NeuroRestore, which is a novel cognitive enhancer for cognitive disorders, and where we have ACD855, the first candidate in that project, currently in phase 1. Interesting possibility with this platform that I'll come back to later on is that there are multiple indications that are possible. Alzstatin is a disease-modifying platform targeting the actual production of these amyloid beta peptides that aggregate in the brain. And here, this is we have 2 candidates that are currently in discovery and preclinical phase. And if we start with the NeuroRestore program, as you may know, neurons, nerve cells or neurons in the brain are highly dependent on specific growth factors for their function and survival. The most known forms are BDNF and NGF, which binds to specific receptors and mediate important functions in the cell, such as to stimulate neuronal communication, enhance neuronal function, survival, and neuroprotection. But it also plays a critical role at the system level to support cognitive function of the organism. Now, in Alzheimer's disease, these systems are disturbed, and what our compounds do is that they enhance the signaling of these systems and normalize the function of the system, and thereby restore neuronal communication, which we've been able to show in preclinical experiments, but also, more importantly, restore cognitive function, which we've also been able to show in a number of animal models. Given the broad effect profile of this target mechanism, this means that this system also has a potential for other indications. There are actually both strong scientific rationale but also genetic linkages to other disorders. And one of them obviously being cognitive impairments in Alzheimer's disease, which is a primary indication for this program, but certainly so also in Parkinson's, in traumatic brain injury, but also in certain sleep disorders. Another interesting area is around depression, where we have good, strong preclinical data in models of depression. There is also a very strong scientific rationale for this mechanism in depression. We also have specific orphan indications in the ear and eye that are directly linked to this mechanism of action. And we have then different candidates targeting these different indications. So I think here is a very interesting market opportunity in multiple indications for this program. The second program is called alzestatin, and this is targeting the production of the amyloid in the brain. And about a decade ago, we didn't know that much about actually progression of the disease, but we learned the last decade that A-beta is actually accumulated some 10 to 15 years before symptom onset. So the disease starts much earlier than the symptoms appear. And here you can see on the red line the A-beta amyloid being formed over time, and over here you start seeing symptoms. So that also indicates that we have a much better possibility to actually affect the progression of the disease the earlier we go into the disease and prevent these secondary and tertiary events of the disease. And this is also what we've seen now in various types of clinical trials, that you go into earlier patient populations such as mild cognitive impairment or even pre-symptomatically in high-risk populations. And that's also shown to have better clinical efficacy, as shown now with BAN2401 or aducanumab, for example. Now, alzestatin targets the production of these A-beta because amyloid is formed by the sequential cleavage of a protein called APP. And there are two enzymes that cleaves out this final sticky toxic peptide called A-beta42, which over time forms aggregates such as oligomers, protofibrils, and eventually these amyloid plaques in the brain. And these aggregates are toxic to the nerve cells. Now, our compound binds to the last enzyme in this process and modulates how this enzyme functions, so that rather than forming these sticky toxic A-beta42 peptides, shorter fragments are formed that are non-toxic and do not form these aggregates. Moreover, we have also shown that these smaller fragments actually seems to have an inhibitory effect on forming these larger aggregates. So it actually has a dual function. We've also been able to show the compound has good effects in animal models, lowering the amount of these sticky and toxic A-beta-42 peptides. The mechanism has strong genetic support. Actually, the majority of all inherited forms of Alzheimer have a mutation in this specific enzyme. And importantly, it spares the normal function of the enzyme, so it has a better safety profile than several of the enzyme inhibitors. And being a small molecule, it's easy to administer oral tablets, as well as having a low cost of goods. And this shows you our pipeline, where we have 3 candidates in the new Restore program, ACD855 being furthest. We started clinical trials in December last year. And then we have 2 programs in the alstatin program, one which is in preclinical stage and the other one in discovery phase. And this is just the key take-home messages. We are, as a company, targeting an area of huge unmet medical need. The programs are based on strong science with first-in-class properties and potential to become true game changers in the field. And it's backed up by a strong team with extensive experience from the field, and we're targeting a multi-billion euro market opportunity. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for interesting presentation.
Okay.
I'm going to find my papers first of all. There you are. So as a fairly young company, having been listed late last year, you have quite a long history of research in Alzheimer's area, and your background is from AstraZeneca, is that correct?
Yes, actually all of us founders were at AstraZeneca at the CNS unit in Södertälje at the time of the closure of the CNS unit there in 2012. And that was what actually kick-started setting this organization together. Because we felt that this is an area, obviously, with a huge unmet medical need, and we felt that we still had some really good ideas that we wanted to move further with. So I think this was kind of the starting position. And then we didn't start the AlzeCure Pharma until late 2016. So the first one was kind of primarily during the discovery phases of the projects.
And now you have a pipeline. You have 2 separate tracks, so to speak. You have a Neural Restore and alstatin. What's the strategy behind these the 2 different parallel tracks?
Well, I think it has to do with, now that we know that this disease has a very long progression, many years, so certainly probably more than 20-25 years, and most likely you will look at different type of treatments during the progression of the disease, while at the very late stages disease modifiers will have a much larger kind of obstacle in trying to prevent further progression of the disease, because certainly there a lot of the neurons have already been lost. So I think symptomatic treatments will still play a very important role in the later stages of disease, while the disease modifiers will certainly come into play into the earlier phases of the disease. So I think what we're trying to target then is 2 different target populations with our programs.
And given the history within drug development targeted at Alzheimer's, there are a lot of disappointments and failures, to be frank.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the most probable way forward to actually find something that works?
No, I think we've already starting to see some really positive signals now coming out last year, both with Biogen's aducanumab and BioArctic's BAN2401 being 2 examples. I think we're clearly showing that when we go in earlier in the disease progression, then we been before, we start seeing clinical signals. And given the slide I showed you before on the progression of disease, I think as we venture in early in the disease, I think that's where we start to see clinical efficacy. But I also think that in the future, we'll see much more of these type of combination treatments, both disease modifiers and symptomatics combined, small molecules and biologics combined, dependent on where you are in the disease progression. I think that's quite likely scenario.
So given the fact that there is a competitive landscape now, with, you mentioned a few of the companies working towards the same goal, so to speak, that wouldn't still benefit more patients and probably not be, well, competition is good in this field. So.
Yes, and I think that's clearly a necessity as well, because this is a highly complex area. So I think there needs to be different approaches how to target this specific problem. And given the many millions of people that are affected in the disease, there's certainly room for many different type of treatments dependent on where you are in the disease.
But so, I mean, Alzheimer's is a huge market, a huge unmet need. But your new Restore platform actually has the potential for several indications.
Yes,
could you?
And I think that's a very, I think from a marketing side, I think that's a very interesting opportunity, because there we are not only betting on Alzheimer's disease as an indication, but there are also other indications that could be possible. And I think in the light of that we have multiple candidates here, we can actually target one candidate for one indication, other indication for another for another candidate for another indication. We could have differential pricing for these. There are different market opportunities, and I think there's a strong scientific rationale for these other indications for the new Restore platform. So I think it's a very interesting and exciting opportunity.
And speaking of excitement, what are you most excited about in AlzeCure right now? What's going to happen next that you like?
Well, I'm obviously very excited about that we did go into the phase 1 studies as planned in December. So I think that's certainly on the kind of next milestone on the horizon, going through the phase 1, but also bringing the alstatin program to the clinic, I think is also going to be highly exciting. And we are developing these backup compounds for other indications as well. So that's also another very interesting opportunity that we'll have more data on this year. So, yeah, really exciting year, I think.
We're looking forward to take part of that. Thank you very much, Johan, for being with us today.
Thank you very much.